All right, everyone, from Big Ten Media Days, we just got back from Indianapolis last night, right into a conversation with Mr. Phil Steele right here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you all stopping by. Leave those sponsored comments and questions there in the live chat, and we will bring those across to Phil Steele. We appreciate Phil, of course, who produces the standard of the college football preview magazines each and every preseason. Phil, how you doing today?
I am doing great, Mark. How about yourself?
I am doing just fine. Again, we appreciate your time. Know that you go on a whirlwind of these after you get the magazine published. And so thank you so much for always stopping by. We always appreciate this conversation.
I always look forward to your show, Mark.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. First of all, before we get to the landscape of college football and what the 2023 season may look like, in regards to the magazine, I think you're at about, let's see, was it 342 pages? Where are we here? I'm looking at it right. 352. There it is, folks. You got to grab it if you have yet to do so. It is something that you will just want to have at your fingertips throughout the college football season. It is amazing. 352 pages, which in Phil Steele language and code equates to about 3,500 pages with all the way you pack in the information. It's phenomenal. Any changes to the magazine this particular year?
We did not make any major changes to the magazine. I like to keep the two full pages the same exact way each year because it's the quickest, easiest reference in college football. I mean, if you want to know a team's starting left tackle, you could close your eyes and point to the position on the page where that's at. If you want to know what the team's record was 7 years ago, you know exactly where to look. Who the leading rusher was last year, you know where to look. What the final score was from 2 years ago, you know where to look. It's all in the same spot every page. However, the one thing that did change the last 2 years has been this damn transfer portal, Mark. And what it caused us to do is we go to the press a little bit later than normal. In fact, some magazines were hitting the newsstands late May, early June, which I find inconceivable with the transfer portal closing May 15th. They had to go to the press like May 1st. What I did is I waited until the May 15th transfer portal closed, and then we gave it 3 full weeks so we could find out where all these players were landing. And I think we landed got about 97% of them landed. There's very few players that we did not put on the pages. In fact, I talked to 123 of the 133 head coaches this year, Mark, and they all have my cell phone number. And I said, look, you get a player, I don't care if it's June 6th, text me, call me. And we were adding players June 6th, one day before the magazine goes to the press, adding that to the position right up and redoing our power ratings on each team as it went on. So it made the final 3 weeks of the magazine much more hectic, but I believe we're by far the magazine's got the best 3-4 deeps in the country.
I'm still trying to let that 97% figure soak in because that's phenomenal to be able to keep up with the transfer portal when you've got something to publish. It's another thing to do what I do where we can just in real time, of course, update and just produce another video, but to produce this type of publication and to be that up to date is phenomenal. So you have really weathered the storm in regards to the transfer portal more than any magazine out there, and that does not surprise me in any such way. Phil, I started to track a number about 5 or 6 seasons ago because it appeared to me I wanted to know how many teams each season take a significant jump or a significant fall in regards to wins and losses. So I just randomly selected the number of 3 wins. I thought that was a significant number, 3 or more wins or losses differential from one season to the next. And I think that the average college football fan has a very a viewpoint on the landscape of college football that nothing changes. But I've found out that a lot changes. It's just the elites don't generally change. They're the same, but everything else changes. Out of 69 Power 5 teams last season, 27 had either a 3-win or more increase or decrease in wins from the previous season, from 2021 to 22. 27 of the 69, including the new entries into the Big 12. So it just shows that there is turnover in college football. So I want to throw out some teams that are gaining a lot of buzz in the offseason, either really good programs that may join the elite or programs that have a lot of resources that we're counting on turning things around. So I'm going to go to the Big Ten and your thoughts about Penn State possibly breaking that Ohio State-Michigan hold on the Big Ten.
Well, first of all, Mark, I love your research. In fact, you've got my brain percolating right now because, as you know, I have all kinds of metrics articles in the magazine which are predicting teams going up and teams going down. I never researched what you did there, and so that's a fascinating number, 27 of the 69. But, you know, when I look at Penn State, I think this could be the year they have a shot at breaking through. You look at them defensively. All four units rank in my, or all three units, D-line, linebacker, DB, all rank in my top four units in the magazine. So they are absolutely loaded on the defensive side of the ball. And offensively, when I talked to Coach Franklin, he felt it's one of the best offensive lines he's had. You look at the Singleton-Allen combination of running back. They bring back Keandre Lambert-Smith, the wide receiver. They add in Cephas from Kent State. They've got really good tight ends with Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren. And the reason I've got their defense ranked so high is when I went over to the team with Coach Franklin, it basically goes three deep at every position in talent, where talent that could start. So this is a very good team. They do draw Iowa coming out of the West. They also have to play Ohio State on the road, and they get Michigan at home. But keep in mind, the last time they played Michigan at home, they nearly beat them. Michigan needed that late touchdown pass from McNamara to All, who, by the way, both play for Iowa now, but to come out of there with a 21-17 win on the road. So I like Penn State's chances of being a full-fledged contender, not only in the Big Ten East, but nationally as well.
I asked James Franklin this week at Big Ten Media Days his approach to building a program that has to deal with an Ohio State offense and a Michigan offense and how that has affected his recruiting and his development of players. And I don't think he wanted to give up the deal that, you know, they really are focused on that. But he also, you know, he certainly admitted to that of impacting the way they have built the program there at Penn State and trying to deal with those two very different styles of offense. As we march down to the ACC, we continue to wait for Miami to break through and to compare their 5-7 last year to Texas A&M's 5-7. Miami's was a much more disastrous 5-7 from the standpoint, I believe, Phil, in terms of their performance on the field. Texas A&M was generally losing one-score games to really good teams, and of course beat LSU, took Bama to the wire. Miami's just looked awful from start to finish. Maybe their best performance was against Georgia Tech, not a good team. So your prospects of Miami turning things around, I know that I caught them on your most surprising teams.
Yeah, they did make my most improved list, which means I think they're going to get to a bowl game this year. My most improved list takes teams that had a losing record last year and says they have a chance to get into a bowl. And, you know, when I talked to Coach Mario Cristobal this year, he was absolutely buoyant about this year's squad. He feels the area they're most improved is at the offensive line and the defensive line. They're bigger, stronger, faster in both units and deeper in both units as well. I remember just 2 years ago, Tyler Van Dyke was one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Last year, he didn't really fit with Josh Galis' system. This year he did meld with Shannon Dawson's system in the spring. So I look for him to be an improved quarterback. And I think Miami will be a much improved team. However, I'm not making them a contender in the ACC. I think they're probably a year away from that. I've got them an underdog against Texas A&M, at North Carolina, home against Clemson, at NC State, at Florida State. So I'm looking at going from 5 wins. They might make your 3-win scenario. They might get to 8 wins, maybe perhaps even 9 this year. But I don't think they're a bona fide contender in the ACC. They're probably a year away from that.
Folks, we've got our Ohio State show coming up with our crew from Buckeye Huddle and Bucknuts coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and then Iowa Hawkeyes Live with Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm at 5:30 Eastern time. We got Phil Steele here breaking down college football for us. And of course, it is the gold standard of college football preseason magazines. And you got to get it if you don't already. Here it is. It's always a thing of beauty, too. In addition, just the great information, Phil, you just do a phenomenal job of making it very presentable and very pleasing to the eye.
Yeah, we don't have full-page pictures of players or cheerleaders or ads. It's just information on top of information. And I think you hit it right on the head. I think I added up all the words and stats in the magazine. There's probably 1 million words and stats in the magazine. So we pack as much information in there as possible, and it's all in the same order on every page.
Phil, when I talked about 5-7 at Miami, I alluded to 5-7 at Texas A&M, and of course, the talent is there. And I alluded to some of the outcomes last season. Your thoughts about Bobby Petrino taking over the offense to a certain extent, or maybe that's still in question as to how much he's going to wrestle away from Jimbo Fisher. But your thoughts about Texas A&M?
Now, A&M's a team that's got me all fired up, Mark. It's a team where when I went over the team with Coach Fisher last year, keep in mind, last year Texas A&M was number 124 on my experience chart. So they were one of the least experienced teams in the country. And what I do when I talk to the coach, I try to spend about an hour with each one, is I send them over my team pages, which have every player on the roster, all my stats, all my notes on the players. And I say, okay, tell me about the strengths and weaknesses of each one, put my guys in order, and then give me a wrap-up of the position. So when we're wrapping up most of the positions, like the offensive line, he said, Phil, we're going to have one of the best offensive lines in the country next year. He would follow a lot of those position recaps with next year. Well, now it is next year. And they go from number 124, my experience chart, all the way to number 14. Keep in mind, last year, they lost their star wide receiver, Aniyah Smith, after 4 starts. They used 3 different starting quarterbacks due to injury. The offensive line at times started 2 or 3 freshmen. The defense was banged up as well. Now, even in that year, as you correctly pointed out, they beat LSU 38-23. They were at the Alabama 2-yard line at the end of the game, throwing into the end zone with a chance to win, down by 4 points. They could have knocked off both those teams last year, even in a 5-7 season. You know, they've recruited just as good as Alabama and Ohio State have the last 5 years. This is a team ready to explode. I see them as my number 1 most improved team, my number 2 surprise team, which is a team I think can actually have a shot at the title. The only questions I have, they do have to play both LSU and Tennessee on the road, and they catch Tennessee the week after playing Bama. But I think they're capable of even winning the West this year and being a legitimate contender. So I'm very bullish on A&M. Love the over 7.5 for their win total.
Phil, USC is an overwhelming choice in the Pac-12. Oregon State gave them all they could handle in Corvallis, of course, 17-14 in the most the best defensive effort against the Trojans and Caleb Williams last year. Your thoughts about an Oregon State team, of course, DJ Uiagalelei taking over quarterback, and what a job Jonathan Smith has done.
Yeah, and, on philsteele.com this week, I have a blog up there right now about the Big Six, Little Six of the Pac-12. And some of the things I found interesting is that USC, Washington, Oregon, Utah, UCLA, and Oregon State last year, when they took on the bottom 6 teams of the Pac-12, they went 30-2. They only had 2 losses all year. So I'm just concerned with how they fare against each other. And in this case, Oregon State has been great at home. They are 12-1 at home the last 2 years. And that was playing in a Reser Stadium that was under construction and not fully at full capacity. Now they're at full capacity this year. And I've been going over the roster with Jonathan Smith all 6 of his years. I can tell you it's vastly different than that first year when they barely went 1 deep. This year they do go 3 deep at some positions. And it seemed like every position we wrapped up, he was saying, hey, this is probably the best we've been at this position since we've been here. This is a loaded team. They got average quarterback play last year. I think DJ Uiagalelei gives them above average, if not good, quarterback play. Damian Martinez back at running back. The offensive line is solid. Defensively, they add in a guy like Calvin Hart coming in from Illinois to go along with an already good defense. And then you look at the schedule. Of the big boys, it seemed like last year the home teams mostly won. They went 8-3 when the top 6 were taking on the top 6. Well, Oregon State only has 1 road game against one of the power teams, Oregon. They avoid a couple of the top teams. They get Utah at home. They get Washington at home. They get UCLA at home, and they don't have to play USC. So I think if you're looking for a sleeper pick to win the Pac-12 this year, Oregon State would be your choice. I can see them having a double-digit win season once again and being a legitimate contender in the Pac-12.
I'm certainly not touting DJ as a Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson, of course, but did improve from 9 touchdowns, 10 interceptions the previous season to 22-7 TD to pick ratio last year. And we know that the wide receiver play at Clemson, nothing close to what it was for a decade there. So that caused some issues, of course, for DJ. Moving to the Big 12, the talk surrounding Texas, and we'll get to the Longhorns in a second, but I'm intrigued by Texas Tech. Joey McGuire comes in from Baylor. I raised a few questions, didn't criticize. I was just questioning the hire to a certain extent. But here's a team that had a lead on TCU, that beat Texas, that had a really nice season. Of course, they really took it to Ole Miss in the Texas Bowl. The Red Raiders, your thoughts about their chances?
Yeah, to me, they're a wild card in the Big 12. Mark, I can make a couple of cases for them. First of all, on the negative side, we could take a look at the fact that they had a lot of close wins last year. In fact, they had 4 net close wins, which means take all your close wins, subtract your close losses, and they had 4 of them. They won a couple of games in overtime last year, so that means they were basically one play away from losing those games. So they're a team that could easily last year have been 3 or 4 win team, but they won all their close games. That is a concern for me. On the positive end, this is a team that's got 15 super seniors this year. They've got an infectiously enthusiastic coach in Joey McGuire. They've got one of the best quarterback situations out there. Both Tyler Shuck and Baron Morton have started and won Big 12 games. They've got a deep running back core led by Taj Brooks, a veteran offensive line. And if you have 15 super seniors, you pretty much have a veteran team. They're all the way up to number 25 on my experience chart. So to me, they're a wild card. I got a lot of toss-up games on their schedule, Mark. I go through every year, and for a lot of teams, like in Ohio State, I have them favored in 11 of their 12 games. The only one I don't is at Michigan. Then I also do have some toss-up games, and Tech's got a bunch of them. At West Virginia, Kansas State at home, at BYU, TCU at home, at Kansas. Everybody does all toss-up games. Now, if they win all those, they could be a Big 12 contender this year. If they play to their experience level, they could be a Big 12 contender. I think they're a wild card, but my 9 sets of power ratings have them going anywhere from 11-1 to 5-7, and that's pretty much how I am on the team this year. So if you're bullish on Texas Tech, go ahead and be bullish. I've got power ratings that say they're going to go 11-1 this year.
Now, Phil, I'm projecting the Big 12 going forward, 2024 and on, to be the most competitive conference in college football. For those people that are hyper focused on the college football playoff, it could be a rough decade going forward for the Big 12. But if you just love competitive football, my goodness, it's going to be close. Do you believe, even with Oklahoma and Texas still in that conference, that that's the most tightly bunched and the most difficult for you to have projected, maybe from 2 or 3 down to 10 or 12?
Well, were you in my office in February, Mark? What I did in February is, after the first write-through process was over, I pretty much had a good feel for 9 of the 10 conferences out there. I could say, okay, these are your best teams. These are your worst teams. These are the teams in the middle. And this is pretty much the way I think the conference is going to go. All except one. I took my Big 12 sheet of paper, crinkled it up, threw it in the garbage, and said, I don't know what the hell's going on with the Big 12. Who do you pick at the bottom? Who do you pick at the top? And look at how the Big 12's fared the last couple of years. I mean, 2 years ago, Baylor wins the thing after coming from the middle of the pack. They were off a losing season and won the thing. Last year, TCU's playing for the national title game, being picked 7th in the Big 12 at the start of the year. It is the toughest conference by far to predict, because we just see the teams at the bottom are capable, knocking off the teams at the top. In fact, when I talked to Coach Leipold at Kansas, I said, Coach, I'm disappointed. I used to be able to just pick Kansas 12th every year in the Big 12 and be done with it. Now I can't even do that anymore. And he said he was not apologizing. He's pretty happy with where he's got Kansas.
Absolutely. And when you bring that up about Dave Aranda and the 2-7 to a Big 12 championship game and then back down to 6-7, it made me think of Matt Rule and, of course, his great accomplishments there at Temple and at Baylor, and those turnarounds that he accomplished there. Now he's got to do it in the Big 10. How confident are you that a Matt Rule can make that kind of turnaround, something to get Nebraska to respectability in the Big 10 Western Division?
Yeah, I'm a big Matt Rule fan, Mark. Going back to the days at Temple, I remember his first year there, he won either 1 or 2 games, and all of a sudden they were right at the top of the conference. And when he took the Baylor job, remember the narrative, if you go back and read articles from that time, the narrative is, why is Matt Rule taking the Baylor job? The Baylor job is the worst job in college football. There's so much off the field things going on. There's so many scholarship limitations. Players are bolting the program. No one wants that job. And what did he do? 3 years later, they're in a January 1 bowl game. So I think he can get it done no matter where he goes. And I think he will have an improved team this year. I've got Nebraska on my most improved list, which means I think they will get to a bowl game. I think they get the biggest upgrade of any team in the country, going from one coach to another, because I wasn't wild about the job Scott Frost did there. I am wild about what Matt Rule can do. I like the way he's recruiting. Now, is Nebraska going to be a contender in the West, Big Ten West right off the bat? No. But I do think they get to a bowl game this year. He's got talent. He's got 15 returning starters coming back. So they made my most improved list. I expect them to get to a bowl game this year, which is much different than his first year at Temple or Baylor, where he won either one or two games. So a better than expected season for Nebraska, but I don't see him as a contender in the West this year. But in the near future, yes.
Yeah, from 1 and 2 wins to conference championship games 2 seasons later is pretty remarkable. And the other thing, the narrative at the time, Phil, of course, was that here's a New York guy who played at Penn State, who coached at Temple. What does he know about going to Texas and trying to win in that conference? So he certainly proved a lot of people wrong. No question about that. And I asked him yesterday at Big Ten Media Days, I said, you've walked in a room at Temple, you've walked in a locker room at Baylor with nobody in the room that knows how to win. They all have to be taught, how do you win, and changing that culture. And I said, how do you do that at Nebraska? Because you've proven it twice. What are those principles? And he said, we start with even just showing up on time, show by being punctual, by starting, like, all the details down to the granular is how you build that winning culture, according to Matt Rule. And we appreciate the super chat contribution. Michigan Jason says, Mark, good job in Indianapolis. Wish you got to ask Jim Harbaugh a question. Well, I actually did on the side session. And Phil, my question to Jim Harbaugh was, Jim, you stood here at Big Ten Media Days at this exact place 2 years ago and said, we are going to beat Michigan, or going to beat Ohio State, or I'm going to die trying. And I said, how confident were you when you made that statement? And he said, yeah, I'm not going to tell you that. He just kind of laughed and said, we got it done. I don't have to tell you how confident I was at the time. But
I love it. I love it. Mark, I listen to a lot of these questions that come up at Media Day. You ask great questions. A lot of those folks don't, but so I gotta hand that to you. Listening to some of the questions you asked, I'm like, that's a really good question.
I appreciate that, Phil. We've got the very best in producing a college football standard right here, folks. There it is. It requires no introduction, but Phil Steele's College Football 23 preview. It's out there for you to get. Phil, for those people that have yet to get their preseason magazine, what is the best way to go about that? I know that I just tracked down a Barnes & Nobles and went and drove 45 minutes to go grab one, but I did it the old school way.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mark. And, it's different than in past years where it's been like at Walmart, grocery stores, and all over the place. This year it is exclusively at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So save your gas money. Only drive to Barnes & Noble or Books A Million. They have the magazines in stock, and those are only brick-and-mortar stores. Now, if you want to get it online, you can go to philsteele.com. And at philsteele.com, I'm going to charge you a shipping charge. It may cost to ship things. However, you get the hard copy, but we'll give you the digital magazine for free at philsteele.com when you order the hard copy. And the digital magazine's actually updated all the way through September. So if you flip to the Northwestern page on the digital copy, it lists David Braun as the starting head coach. If a player's out for the year, we have them circled in the digital magazine, and we'll keep doing that all the way through September. So Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and philsteele.com. And one thing you might not know about, Mark, there's like 130 some odd games between the FBS and the FCS this year. If you want to learn about the FCS for the first time ever, I have produced 2 full pages on every FCS team. You can actually become an expert on FCS football. philsteele.com, get the digital version of the FCS magazine. It's just $25 with 2 full pages on every FCS team.
Well, I'm going to be a smarter consumer next year and go the digital route. I kind of knew that was the way to go, but I just was kind of desperate and like, I'm going to get this done today, and I'm going to run out there and get it done.
Yeah, so but Mark, you can't mark up your digital version. You got to have them both.
Yes, you're right. So we will do that next season for sure. All right, Phil. We went to the Big 12. Am I correct in making the assessment that even though Texas has yet to accomplish anything, just based on paper, there is a larger gap between Texas and the rest of the conference talent-wise than there is for any other team in college football versus the rest of the conference?
Yeah, and I'm going to give you an interesting statement you might not know, Mark. It seems like Texas underperforms every year, right? Every year they say everybody's picking Texas this year, and they've underperformed. Do you know when the last time Texas was preseason #1 in the media poll?
Preseason #1 in the media poll. 1969?
2009.
2009.
So
okay.
It's actually been 13 years since they were preseason #1,
which was
whereas
pretty
everybody
accurate.
thinks that they're #1 each and every year. But what I agree with you as far as the talent goes. In fact, if you look on page 138 of the magazine, I list the unit rankings for the Big 12 conference. I have Texas #1 or tied for #1 in all 8 positions. So they're loaded talent wise. And I have to be completely honest with you. When I started the magazine process in December, I said, I don't want to pick Texas. Everybody's going to be gunning for Texas. Texas has the toughest schedule of any of the Big 12 top teams. In fact, they're the only one of the top 6 that has to play each of the other 5. The Big 12 won't want them to win. Remember that Oklahoma State game last year? I think they got called for 13 penalties, and Oklahoma State got called for 0. I'm wondering about all that stuff, but the talent just played out and won, and I ended up picking Texas to win the Big 12 this year simply because they are the most talented team.
We got Phil Steele on the line. Of course, it's the gold standard of preseason college football magazines, Phil Steele's College Football Preview 2023. And I've got the advantage over you, Phil, that I can wait until maybe the night before the season and make my predictions known. That's why I'm hitting you up for all these surprise teams and all of that, because it's a fairly interesting process trying to nail down who's going to be that breakthrough team. When we think about the teams that lose the most talent, we gravitate to Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State on down the line. Did Illinois lose more talent than what they can afford to lose? If you follow me, did they lose the greatest percentage of talent on one team?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Mark, I felt Illinois was the best team in the Big Ten West last year. If you look at them, they just dominated teams at the line of scrimmage, beat them up. I was shocked that they somehow lost to Michigan State at home last year. Of course, a big part of that was, they outgained them by 147 yards. It just came up short in areas. I was shocked they lost to Purdue. And then the Michigan game, Michigan kicked that field goal at the end of the game to beat them, or else all of a sudden they would have won the West. I felt they were the best team. Now, they still have talent. You look up front defensively, Newton and Randolph are both NFL guys on the defensive line. Offensive line, Adams and Pearl are both NFL guys. And I think wide receiver Isaiah Williams is an NFL guy, but they lose a lot. Devin Witherspoon, the #1 draft pick, Sidney Brown, the #3 draft pick, Jatavius Martin, the #2 draft pick off the defense. Plus, they lose their defensive coordinator. Offensively, Chase Brown was the focal point of the offense. Is Love or McCray going to be able to replace him? That's a big piece. And I thought DeVito, for transfer quarterback, did quite well last year. So they did lose a lot of talent. I don't think they're as strong as last year. I know they're strong up front. I've got faith in Brett Bielema. He's one of the best head coaches out there. And look at the job he did there. He made Illinois more Wisconsin than Wisconsin was last year when they went into to Wisconsin and out physical the Badgers. But I would have to agree with that statement. They have lost a bunch.
I would be remiss if I didn't hit up Ohio State and Michigan directly, because we've got a large Ohio State-Michigan contingent here. So for me, Ohio State may still have the more talented roster, and they may still be the program that's more equipped, better equipped to win a playoff game, especially against an SEC champion. However, we know what's happened when they've met on the field in the fourth quarter, in particular, with Michigan just leaning on them, pushing them around. And Michigan, I don't have many questions about Michigan. Basically, I think they may have a marginal wide receiver core, and other than that, they are solidified everywhere. Where Ohio State, for as talented as they are, the quarterback's a question. And the fight internally seems to be between, do you trust a rookie quarterback, or do you trust, the track record says they are going to prepare whomever it is, Justin Fields, CJ Stroud, on down the line, going all the way back. People just talk about who Ryan Day's developed, but there has not been an Ohio State starting quarterback who has not played for a championship since Steve Belisari back in 2000. They've all played for championships. So they get to that point, but the offensive line needs shuffling. They lost 2 tremendous tackles to the NFL. The secondary was, as you mentioned in your preview, the Ohio State secondary standard is elite, very best in the nation, and it has been nothing close recently. There's hope and optimism that they can get back to near that standard. I believe you have them 12th at defensive back in the nation, but that Ohio State-Michigan dynamic is an interesting one.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think you hit it on the head talent-wise. I actually have Ohio State number 2 in my power poll and Michigan number 3. And then you're wondering, well, why did I pick Michigan to win the Big Ten, although I've got Ohio State right up there with them? And I guess it would be a couple of question marks that I have with Ohio State. Number 1 is the quarterback, although in the last 10 years, they've had the best quarterback in the Big Ten 9 of the 10 years. And a lot of times that was with a first-time starter. So I think Kyle McCord will do well in that respect. I've got questions about the tackle spot. You hit it right on the head. They lose 2 high-quality tackles, and you wonder who the replacements are going to be. And tackle's an important position on offense. And defensively, the secondary. It used to be an automatic for me, Mark, to mark down Ohio State. It will be in my top 10 secondaries. And it hasn't been the case under Ryan Day. So those are the question marks. And then the biggest question mark for me is the schedule. I think Michigan draws by far the better schedule than does Ohio State. The Buckeyes have to play Notre Dame on the road. I consider Notre Dame a title contender this year, especially with Sam Hartman at QB. They have to play Wisconsin on the road the week after playing Penn State. I've got Wisconsin, my number 1 surprise team in the country this year, a non-top 10 team that I think can actually play for the playoff. And then they have to play Michigan on the road November 25th. And when they play Wisconsin, it's a week after playing Penn State. So that's a brutal schedule. And part of the reason that I've got them number 5 and just missing the playoff is the schedule, the question marks at tackle, and then the secondary.
Phil, we know you need to run. I'm going to squeeze in one more question if you have time. Your conversation with Kirk Ferentz regarding Iowa. And of course, this is the biggest aberration to me in college football. It's almost amusing how great the special teams and the defense is every season, elite or near elite. And then the offense, just mind-blowing how awful it is. You would think that they could randomly call plays and they would produce more yardage than they do as a bottom 5 offense in college football the past few seasons. Was there anything in that conversation or anything in your metrics besides having possibly the best quarterback that they've had in a decade in Cade McNamara that would give you optimism that Iowa can form some sort of a semblance on offense?
Oh, absolutely. There's numerous things. First of all, offensive line. You go back to 2 years ago, they basically had 1 returning starter on the offensive line. It was their All-American center, but they were extremely young at the other positions. Last year, they lost their All-American center. They were still fairly young and got a little bit older, but now this year, they've got a legitimate offensive line. It's finally with the type of offensive line they used to have. And it hasn't been that long since I always had a good offense. You go back to 2020, they averaged 31.8 points per game. 2018, 31.2 points per game, 375 yards per game. So the offense can produce. Now that they have the offensive line, they've got the running backs with Johnson and Williams. When Cade McNamara hit the transfer portal, my first thought within 5 seconds of seeing his name was go to Iowa. And here he is. He's the perfect guy. He's the game manager, but he's a high percentage quarterback that doesn't make mistakes. And let's face it, Iowa's offense, I'm sure, is conservative in the fact that let's not go lose this game. We've got the defense that's not going to allow the other team to score. We got the special teams that can pin the other team deep. Let's not take any undue chances. McNamara won't take those chances, but they can trust him with more. He brings over Eric All coming over from Michigan. McNamara to All was the touchdown combination that beat Penn State 2 years ago on the road, and now here they are at Iowa. They've got Lachey at that tight end. They got Reganey, a wide receiver. I think they're going to have a vastly improved offense. The defense, one of the best in the country. Shocked that Nickel Jackson stayed in the portal as long as he did. I thought he was one of the ACC's best linebackers, and now he comes here to Iowa to replace Jack Campbell. I think that's a great move. And then I still rate him the number 2 special teams. So I look for them to have a strong defense, a strong special teams, and a much improved offense this year. Add it all up. When I did the first right through the magazine, I had Iowa as my favorite to win the West. The only reason I didn't pick them is they do have to play both Penn State and Wisconsin on the road this year. But I think if you're following Iowa football, you are going to find an much improved offense, the usual defense and special teams, and a very dangerous team.
And all of that's fair. I will say that in doing some of my research, that aside from that 2020 season in which they did go 6-2 and finished in the top 50 in America in offense, you have to go back to 2006 to find a top 50 in total yardage, yards per game, Iowa offensive team. So, it has been a bit rough, but there are signs of hope there, certainly with McNamara and others. Caleb Johnson, a really good running back, coming back 200-yard game against Purdue last year. Phil Steele, the best that in the business, the industry standard, it's right here. You got to grab it. All of you watching us love college football, so why not have the best information and the most accurate and just exhaustive tool at your fingertips? Phil Steele, thank you so much, Phil. It's always a great time talking to you and learning more about college football.
Hey, Mark, time sure flies when I'm on the phone with you and talking to you. So it was a lot of fun talking football, as always. Like I said, you ask great questions and a very knowledgeable source. So always enjoy our conversations, my friend.
Phil, enjoy the season.
All right. Thanks a lot, Mark. Have a good one.
All right. You too. Bye-bye. The great Phil Steele joining us on the phone here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate him stopping by. This has been a yearly visit by Mr. Steele. I did notice a couple questions there in the chat. Keep in mind that I pretty much covered those based on the ones that I did see. And therefore, we had a great conversation with Phil Steele. Absolutely. We've got more coverage coming today of the great sport that we all love here, Ohio State Live. So the Voice of College Football programming schedule, topsy-turvy this week, of course, with us going to Indianapolis. So keep that in mind. A lot of shows had to change or be canceled. So Ohio State Live, typically on Wednesday, coming your way in about 20 minutes at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on the Ohio State channel. Catch us for Buckeyes Live. We will review and wrap up Big Ten Media Days and also get everyone all set for the beginning of fall camp. So it's kind of a recap, preview, Ohio State Buckeyes Live, and the same deal when Corey Brada joins me on Iowa Hawkeyes Live, typically on Tuesday. Friday this week, we go Hawkeyes Live at 5:30 Eastern, 4:30 Central with Corey. And then late tonight, 10 p.m. Eastern, we will take your calls with everything going on in college football, Colorado to the Big 12, recapping ACC kickoff and Big Ten Media Days. Fall camp starting in just a few days. There's plenty to talk about, and you know where you need to be to talk college football. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here. So 10 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. Bring a large contingent with you. 2 friends, 5 friends, 50 friends to talk college football. And, of course, we will see you on Buckeyes Live in about 20 minutes on the Ohio State channel right here at the Voice of College Football.